Welcome to Enjoyable Learning. Thanks so much for being here. For those who know me, you already know how much I love books. Even though I often read digital text now, print volumes still offer that tactile, tangible knowledge feeling that is almost indescribable. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Through your actions, examples, and sacrifices, you taught me, along with my siblings, to value real quality literature. In addition to reading innumerable books to us, our parents constantly shuttled us back and forth to several of our beloved libraries. Additionally, they provided an encyclopedia, world book, and literature set, Childcraft, for us, which were new at the time in the 1960s, which we really enjoyed reading during breaks from school. I still remember some of the stories in Childcraft's volumes, and World Book still publishes their updated series. Here's the CI to CZ volume, and as you can see, you can probably see it's been well used and loved. And I'm not sure what happened to that page there. There's a missing page. I'm going to show you one of my favorite articles in here when I was a child. It is clothing around the world. And one of the interesting parts of what the way World Book approached their encyclopedia is every article started out with a lower vocabulary, and as the article went further and deeper into the text, uh, they used a higher level vocabulary. So that made it accessible for all ages. You can see clothing around the world. This is the color pictures where it talks about costumes of ancient peoples, and it goes on, and various ages and stages and places. And um, my sister and I used to we would use tracing paper. We would trace these and make paper dolls. And my own children did that as well. My son even liked some of the uniforms. He liked to draw pictures of some of the uniforms of some of the military officers in here. So, as you can see, there's quite a lot just in this one article, one of our favorites. And then when you get to where it says clothing of today, of course, this is the 1960s, so that's no longer clothing of today. However, the older costumes and the areas, that didn't change. If you want to look at clothing that was in the later decades since this encyclopedia, then you can just always go to the library, look at resources, and also, of course, on the internet. But this gives you also uh, a peek into an earlier time period where you can compare modern sources with the sources we have today. This is the iBook. For instance, if you wanted to, say, look at, there's some interesting articles about Native Americans. Let's say you wanted to look up Iraq, which, of course, is in the news, or Iran, and compare that to sources today that you would find. Um, that would, and then you can see how if anything has changed. And another thing interesting about the World Book was it'll have facts in brief. It has, of course, the maps. And a lot of this information, like I said, the history especially did not change, only the current events. The government, of course, will have changed since then. Um, so it's very interesting to compare the way it was back in the 1960s compared to now. And then it has related articles, outline, and questions, which would be very useful for homeschooling. And also, if you're writing an article, you could answer these questions. You could also find out what knowledge your children have learned about whatever the subject is that you're studying at the time. So let's look at speak more about childcraft, and then about my own. We'll get to this in a minute. The Children's Hour. So first published in 1934, the first edition of Childcraft should reach public domain status in a few short years. Childcraft is the version that a literature set my parents had. There's a little heart there that somebody gave me. Anyway, um, I do not know what happened to my parents' Childcraft edition, but they gifted their World Book copy to my children, which I just showed you. We supplement the articles with library materials, but most of the articles remain relevant today as a comparison for more modern texts. Following my parents' footsteps as best we could, my husband and I also provided several literature sets. Perhaps our family favorite was a battered secondhand 16-volume set called the Children's Hour, which kept our youngsters' attention for hours at a time. Our edition of the Children's Hour, complete in 16 volumes, contains children's classic literature, stories, poetry, myths and legends, folk and fairy tales, adventure, inspiration, and a character lesson guide for parents. It was edited by Marjorie Barrows and published by Grolier in 1969. So this is the reader's guide right here. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Here's one of our favorite volumes called Favorite Fairy Tales. And as you can see, it does have the table of contents. And for younger readers, which of course you would want to read out loud to your children and let them read along, to possibly using your finger to show them where the text is. As you can see in earlier times, the text was a little more challenging for what is expected today, but that's going to definitely increase your vocabulary. Let me show you one of my favorite stories in here. Let's see now. Here it is. I always loved Hans Christian Andersen, and this is The Emperor's New Clothes. And let's see, another story. Oh, I'm looking for another story here I really liked a lot. Aha, there we go. This is, I always loved tales about dragons. So you can see some of the pictures are, the pictures are color. And here's a poem, which is good for reading before bed to your children. The Little Elf by John Kendrick Bangs. I met a little elf man once, down where the lilies blow. I asked him why he was so small and why he didn't grow. He slightly frowned, and with his eye he looked me through and through. I'm quite as big for me, said he, as you are big for you. So I liked that. Research shows that the Children's Hour collection of children's literature, it was first published as a series of books way back in 1969. I'm sorry, 1869, of course. It was compiled by T.S. Arthur, that is Timothy Shea Arthur, who lived from 1809 to 1885. The series began, however, as stories in magazine form. Later, the publisher bound some of the magazine stories into a series of books. The magazine claimed its title based on the name of the wildly popular poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, which was first published in 1860. You can search familyfriendpoems.com to read the poem. To read more about the Children's Hour series and download copies of the books, the ones that are in public domain, see the links in my post. According to what I could find out, education publisher Houghton, Mifflin and Company, Boston, published new volumes of Children's Hour in 1907. You can find it at openlibrary.org. In 1907, Eva Tappan March edited the Children's Hour in 10 volumes. Here is the content of each volume. Version 1, Folk Stories and Fables. Version 2, Myths from Many Lands. Volume 3, Stories from the Classics. Volume 4, Stories of Legendary Heroes. Volume 5, Stories from Seven Old Favorites. Volume 6, Old-Fashioned Stories and Poems. Volume 7, The Out-of-Door Book. Volume 8, Adventures and Achievements. Volume 9, Poems and Rhymes. Volume 10, Modern Stories. Each series of the Children's Hour books offered a wide range of enjoyable literature appealing to children of various ages. For over a century, the Children's Hour has significantly influenced children's literature as well as helping to shape the character of American students for several generations. Well, more than several, I would say. Stories explored complex moral questions and themes related to character traits, including honesty and integrity. Perhaps we need these now more than ever. This series remains a classic, continuing to be referenced and appreciated in discussions about children's literature and its evolution. The key themes in the Children's Hour include the destructive power of lies, society's expectations and personal relationships, and the exploration of morality and truth. The series also touches on issues of reputation and the consequences of false accusations. Story themes contain strong morals and often focused on how negative behavior carries long-lasting consequences. So I was going to show you just a little bit in here. This is the 16th volume of the Children's Hour. It has science fiction stories. You can see we read this a lot also. It has a lot of science fiction in it that is now classics. However, way back in the back, it has the pages for parents. So it has things like fairy tales in the spirit, poetry and childhood, imagination in children's literature, all by various authors. Also tells about the authors that wrote the stories or edited the stories. Quite a bit there. I don't think the children ever read those, and I never completely read them myself. The part that I find especially useful, however, is the very back of the index. Of course, you can look up things by subject. And so you can read about birds, you can read about dogs. There's a part where you can read about character. For instance, it has a whole bunch of stories about ambition, bravery, a lot of stories about bravery. On the next page, it has carefulness and carelessness, cooperation, courtesy, curiosity, friendliness, happiness, heroism, hospitality, etc. I'm not reading all of them. Pages and pages and pages of character studies that you could use. Then, of course, then it gets back into just ordinary index of the stories. So if you like the idea of a character-based curriculum, look for an old anthology of literature set with an index based on character traits. Yes, they really did make them that way. Use the index to look up character qualities paired with stories such as bravery, the Fern Tiki, cooperation, Life of William Shakespeare, friendliness, Heidi's Adventures on the Mountain, heroism, Blaze in the Forest Fire, industry, Albert Schweitzer, The Doctor in the Jungle. These are just a few examples taken from my copy of the 1969 edition of the Children's Hour, Volume 16, edited by Marjorie Barrows and published by Grolier. Note that you can freely download earlier editions, such as the Children's Hour that was published in 1907 and is now in the public domain, from archive.org. I can't vouch for every volume, however. I have not read every volume in every edition. As always, read stories first before reading them to your children and use your best judgment regarding appropriate content. If you made it this far in the video, thanks for visiting Enjoyable Learning. I really appreciate you. Come back soon. Keep on having fun learning every day. If you can take a moment to like and subscribe, I thank you. May God bless you and your family.